Alrighty guys, well here we are. I've been very excited about doing this interview for some time. Become a really good friend of mine in the last few years, Kev. When you're home, you're always will call past the shop and come for a yarn. And guys, it is the one and only Kevin Clarke. Thanks for joining us today, Kev.
Yeah, you're welcome, mate. You got a great shop, so I love coming down to it.
A guy that's made lures most of his life.
I know I'm going to be able to get what I want.
A guy that's made lures most of his life still loves them coming and buying lures, so it's pretty cool. I'm very excited about this, Kev, because we've always talked about doing something like this, and I think there's a lot of stuff, your knowledge, that would be great to get out there. This is our third one of these we've done one with Matt from Baramba Lures and Debbie, and just like yourself, wealth of knowledge. So we're just going to dive in today, guys, and just chat to Kevin everything about lures, a little bit of the fish rehabilitation that he did with the Eastern Cod, and just see where it goes. I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic chat. So Kev, kick us off. Who's Kevin Clarke? Where did it all start for Kevin Clarke?
Well, it all started in Coracai. I was born in Coracai and lived on the Richmond River, so I grew up, my mum and dad were great fishermen and really keen anglers, so we never ever could say we're going to go and play cricket or rugby league or something like that, because you had to just get in a horse and sulky and go fishing.
Go fishing.
So we spent our life on the Richmond River, and I was fascinated with lures as I got older. Around 5 years of age, I can remember seeing Dad with these, he was using Bellbrook lures and stuff like that, and he used to make me little lures out of teaspoons, just the end of the teaspoon and that, and you'd put it on a Ned Kelly rod and flick it out and pull it around in the water, and the bass would fly out and grab it. So I was just fascinated with lures and what they did and how they attracted fish and stuff like that. So when I was about 12 or 13, I started to, make a few wooden lures when we lost one or something like that. And with the Bellbrooks, we always had our favourites with them, and the Black Albert was the pick of them. Yeah. And stuff like that. So and then when I made my first lure, it was pretty rough, but it caught fish. Yeah. So...
and just for the viewers at home, Kev, what sort of era are we talking here?
That's you're going back in the 50s.
50s, yeah.
Like 58, and I was... we went to Tenterfield in 1954, I was 9 years old. Wow. And come back down to live again at Tatham and on the river and that, so... Yeah, so going back to when I turned 12, which I was 12 in Tenterfield, I started making an odd lure. They were pretty rough, but they caught fish down, and I started working when I was 15, so I had a few dollars I could buy a lure, and stuff like that. But I really got into it, later on after that, when I started fine-tuning things and realising what I could buy different stuff to make the bibs out of and stuff like that. We used to make them out of tins, like a beer can or a passion fruit, like a tin with beetroot in it. You'd cut the lid off it and
Matt Baramba said he used a Milo tin lid, so the same sort of thing.
Same thing, and we used to use all that sort of stuff. But I just had this fascination with them, and I always caught fish. They just weren't to catch them and eat them. In the early days, we'd keep a meal. Yep. But I just had a fascination with them and just loved them,
So let's dive into 12-year-old Kev. You're at the house. You've got very limited tools. Yeah. Fishing books, I assume, at that time weren't really a thing.
No.
And you definitely didn't have the internet. So how did you learn? Was it a self-taught thing, or was there a couple of people that influenced that?
Well, my dad was the main influence on us, because him and Mum were great fishermen, So Dad, he'd buy us a lure every now and then when he had the money to do it. Yeah. But he'd make us these ones out of teaspoons, and then we started... we'd break a branch off a tree, it'd be as round as your finger and cut it that long, and you'd put a bit of wire through it and put a twitch on that end and this, and it was a surface lure. You'd throw it out and just go like that, and fish would smash it, because there was a lot of bass around that area in the river and that. So then we got to painting them, making them look a bit fancy and that. But you only made a lure when you lost it. You didn't sit there and keep making them. In the 70s I started, before the 70s, about 68, 69, I've still got the original lures I made then, and I only made a couple. Yeah. And they worked really well. So then I started making just that same old shape all the time.
Yep.
And then I got into the 70s and we started changing the shape. And Peter Nesbitt, Pete used to make lures.
Yep.
So I teamed up with Pete and Darryl Schultz.
Yep.
And we started making, little bass lures and Jew lures and flathead lures and stuff like that. We used to paint them with pressure packed tins of paint and stuff like that.
And it's really great that you say that it's a group of mates, because the other few people I've spoken to, exactly the same thing. It was a thing to bring mates together. Like now you might meet a mate at the pub, but you'd meet somewhere, you'd make a few lures, and that was like you get together, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was because you had a real same interest, you're really keen on fishing and heading off up the Clarence and stuff like that. When I went up the Clarence, that was in 1960, and just fell in love with the place. So I'd always fish the Clarence because it's a big river, and it had a lot of big bass in it.
Yep.
The bass, when I started catching bass up there in the 60s, it was like 5 and 6 pound, 7 pound bass. You weren't catching 2 pound and 1 pound, stuff like that.
And for the young guys watching, a 7 pound bass is 3 to 3.5 kilo sort of fish. So a quality wild river bass.
It's a big fish, mate.
Yeah.
And
there wasn't one of them, Kev.
No, it was every cast sometimes, I remember my mate got the first, like when I went up with him one day, and he got one about 5 pound, and I got that excited I let drive and threw the lure clean over the top of the bottle brush tree and up on the paddock, and he took me in and put me up the tree to get me lure back, and he caught another 3 while I was snapping branches off the tree everywhere trying to get the
because you didn't want to make another lure.
I wanted to get back in the water and have a fish, but no, I just kept making lures, and when I got up to where I got in with Down Under, and that we started that off. Then we really got into it and made a lot of lures,
So that leads perfect into our next little segue. So for people that don't know, Down Under lures were one of the original really standout lures that still today is a popular lure that you can just go and buy in your tackle store. Obviously not made out of timber these days, but talk us through that beginning. How did it all happen? The shapes, how did you come up with like that shape? Because we know boomerangs is a very sort of traditional sort of style, and it's nothing else really like it still today on the market. How did that all start, Kev, and what sort of era are we talking now?
Well, you're going into like 86 and 87 and that, and it started off, we were out on Copeton Dam catching yellowbelly, and Rob Smith, myself and Frank Gork-Rogers, and Rob actually wrote an article about it, because every time we threw out, the 3 rods would just go down, and he called it the bat rock. Yeah. It was a big rock in the water, and the gully was coming down and the water was pouring down and going through under it, and all the yellowbelly was stacked in there. I think we caught 109 or 110 yellowbelly in 2 sessions. Phenomenal. On it. And anyway, I lost 2 or 3 lures that I'd made, and I said to Frank, I think Frank lost one, and I said to him, if we keep losing lures like this, we're going to have to make our own. And Frank looked at me and he said, well, why don't we? Yeah. And that's how it started. As simple as that. As simple as that. And Rob Smith, he tore a piece of paper out of a little writing pad each, and we drew a lure on it, and then we put them together, and we decided we'd make that lure. And Rob, I think Rob cut the 2 first little wooden boomerangs about so long. Yep. And I sent them to me, and I hand carved them and put them together and painted them. Yep. And I went out to deep water, and I think I caught 25 fish or something on it. And I had Rob Lockwood with me. Yep. And Michael Digby. And I was in front of them, and I was catching quite a few fish, and then they reckoned that I had the lead run, so you come back behind, and I went back behind them, and they went up, and they got 1 each, and I ended up with about 25. This little lure was just amazing. It was yellow and brown and black stripes on it or something. And Frank's still got it in the museum down at Port Macquarie. Oh, wow. Yeah, he's got one of them. And at that time, fish wouldn't have seen anything like that. No, Kevin. It was something totally new. It just had that beautiful, unusual, oval shape on it, but it just had an action about it that was really unique. Yep. And anyway, Rob went on from there and developed it bigger. You know, went to the 80 mils.
Yep.
And that's how it all started.
And for the people watching at home or listening, it's fair to say, we can't keep losing lures. Probably to people now, they're like, well, they're only $20. But back in those days, like, they definitely weren't that much money, but it was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money when you were only earning £6 a week or something like that, or,
yeah.
you know.
And a quarter of your wages gone on a lure.
Quarter of the wage, and you couldn't do it. So that's what really drove me to making lures, because I remember Vic McChrystal asked me to come up and fish with him in Cardwell in 1980. And everyone was saying, oh, I know people that go up there and they lose all their lures, you know, these monstrous barramundi and mangrove jack and stuff like that. So I think I made around about 40 or 50 lures and I lost one. Because Vic said to me, he said, when you're up here, he said, you need 20, 30 pound line.
Yeah.
And a wire trace about that long.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and you'd get a jack on a branch and he'd be over the branch and the wire would be going like that and then you could pull him out.
Yeah.
But if it was your nylon line, it would have just cut it and broke it off straight away.
And I think, like, for a lot of the younger guys, even my generation, it's hard to understand, like, what were you doing using wire traces? But you're the guys that have taught us now that why we use fluorocarbon or mono in certain situations. Like, back then, you just didn't know. You had to go and learn this stuff yourself.
Yeah,
and hence why you're using a wire trace on barra. And most young guys now go, what are you doing, you clowns? But no one knew back then. Like, if it wasn't for all those guys, yourself doing that back then, who knows where it'd be now?
Yeah, well, we didn't have the lines that, you know, we had the old nylons, but they were pretty heavy and thick.
Yeah.
You know, where you got 80 pound braid on the line now, you know, and it's the size of a 15 pound break and strain line.
Yeah.
Nylon. So yeah, you rigged up and you used wire because you knew you were going to hook a 50 pound barra in a snag and you got to get it out of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's oysters all over the branches and stuff like that. So yeah,
it worked and it caught fish.
Yeah, and it worked. I think the most jacks I got in one evening was 22. You know, just with the wire. And if I hadn't had the wire, I'd have probably lost a lot of lures.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Stuff like that.
So as boomerang progressed, at what stage did you name that lure? Was that early on that you were sort of sitting around and went, let's call this the boomerang, or was it obviously the shape is what it is?
Well, the shape I would brought it into it, but the first lure that we made was I'll probably get it wrong, but siren lures.
Yeah.
And that was the first one, and that was it kicked it off because it was a unique lure in the sense that if you hit a log or a stump with it and let it go, it'd reverse back up off the snag.
Yep. Sorry about that, guys. The postman interrupted us there. So yeah, you had the lure that was backing up off the logs.
Yeah, and it was just a really good lure. And anyway, then Rob decided that to make it a lot easier, he would make up a machine that we could, you know, take the edge off the belly on each side.
Yeah.
It'd be even, and a strip off the back, and then it was just a matter of fine hand sanding it and put it together.
Yeah.
So when he did that, well, we started he'd cut out 100 lures and we'd put them together. But up until then, we were just sitting out. I remember sitting out the back of his shed, the three of us on an old log, and it was just like how Laurie Rapala started off.
Yeah.
Sitting on a log waiting for a bloke to pick him up to go fishing, making a lure.
Making lures.
Yeah. So we sort of went with that idea of that and how he started, so we started the same way. It was good, but you weren't going to make any more money. Like, you'd make enough money to buy a loaf of bread and, you know, a pound of butter and stuff like that. So when we made the machine and got that going, we could turn them out a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And I was invited up to Lake Tinaroo to fish for barramundi by the government, New South Wales Fisheries.
Yep.
So they flew us all up, and I fished with Vic McChrystal up there. And I took up a wooden boomerang lure with me to show the blokes, like the boys said, take one up and show them. And Jack Erskine was there, and Rod Harrison and all these fellas that were there. And we had a big table where we were all sitting down for dinner, and it was about 16 or 18 foot long. And I put this wooden boomerang on the table, and I slid it right down the middle like that, and as it was going past Jack Erskine, he just grabbed it like that. You know, and he said, "Can you make me some of these?"
Yeah, wow.
And that's how it got to where we thought, oh, hang on, we're going to have to change a bit. So I was talking to Gary Wright, and Gary was a guide on the Jardine River.
Yep.
And one of the writers, I can't think of his name just now, Warren Steptoe.
Yes, yeah.
And Warren said to me, he said, "Why don't you just get them made out of polyurethane, you know?" He said, "There's a couple of young blokes that are starting off lively lures."
Yep.
So I come back and I said to the boys, this is what they said to me, and offered, you know, why don't we go and see them? Yep. So we arranged a meeting in Brisbane and went and saw them, and Alan Dolanson and Peter, they started off making them for us out of polyurethane. But they were out of a rubber mould. Yep. So you could only make a certain amount and then the mould would go out of shape. Yep. And you'd get them perfect for a while, and then they'd start to lengthen out, so you had to knock off and make another mould.
Mould again, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how we made the doll's eye ones and got them going. So.
And talking about Alan, obviously, like, he's been a big part of the Australian fishing industry as a whole, like lures, like from that transitioning people from timber over to polyurethane. Yeah. And still to only last year or the year before, he was still doing it. So it's an amazing...
Well, they had a big part to play in that, you know. Like it was like when we made the first wooden boomerang, it changed the whole cottage industry. Yep. And that was the simple thing that changed. It was the way the bib went in with the towing point on the bib. Yes. And the little clip that was made to go in it and stuff like that. I remember Peter Newell asking us, could he use the same technique? Yeah. You know, with that. And I remember Rob saying, yeah, fine. Yeah. Go ahead and do it, you know. When Alan got into it, went to polyurethane, well then that changed the whole thing, you know. Yeah. And then you started to make some money because you could ring up and say, well, I want 200 or 500. But then when we went from there to the plastic, you know, getting them made up in Brisbane, and that was all, that was about $26,000 to get that steel block made with the lure in the centre of it and that. And it took about 2 or 3 hours to set it up. Yeah, because it had all these little holes in it, and the water, the amount of water that had to go through it had to have the temperature in the centre of the block the same as the temperature on the outside, within a couple of degrees. Yep. But we could ring up and say, "Well, do 50,000 for us." Yep. Yeah, and they just, you know, every so many seconds, bang, bang, out fly.
And I think you appreciate the fact, like $26,000 at that time in your life, that's a lot of money.
It was a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Even between the three of you or at the time, that is still a lot of an investment.
Yeah. But it paid off. Yep. You know, like boomerang lures become pretty famous, and they're still making them.
And they're still catching good fish.
Still catching good fish on them. I love them for mackerel, like the spoonbills and stuff like that. Because everyone up north, or not everyone, but most of them, they like big lures, you know, for mackerel and stuff like that. But you can go out there with a spoonbill and, you know, build hell out of them with it. Yeah, it's a good lure.
And I think that that boomerang shape itself, it's been such an iconic shape, hasn't it?
Well, it's changed the whole industry, you know. A lot of people, you look at the lures that are made out of timber and that today, you know, nearly all got that shape.
Yeah, all the kink at some point, one or another. Even like Peter Newell's staff, Garrett, any of those guys, it's all still got that same.
For some reason, that little curve in the back of it, it just gives it a unique action. Yeah. You know, really good action. Yeah.
That we all know that our freshwater species absolutely love.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. We've done well, but I've always acknowledged, you know, just because you make a really nice lure and it catches a lot of fish and a lot of people buy them and that, but there's an amazing amount of beautiful lures out there that that'll outfish you on any time of the day, you know, when fish are feeding and stuff like that. Yeah. And a lot of people lose the identity of saying, well, I make lures, because I make them myself, and lots of them, and they look good and stuff like that. But if I'm not catching a fish you know, on some of my favourite lures and favourite colours.
Yep.
And yours is catching them, well, I'm going to put yours on.
Yeah, 100%.
Because when I go fishing, I don't go fishing and say, well, it's a lovely day underwater, you know, and if I catch a fish, it's a bonus. I go to catch a fish.
Yeah.
So I work my heart out, you know, and I work hard all day to catch it.
And if you need to put a Japanese jerkbait on, you put a Japanese jerkbait on. Who cares? Yeah.
I remember catching flatheaded broadwater on those coloured snakes, you know.
Yeah.
Put one of them on and hook the flathead one up. Plus, and if you don't lose it, you can eat it at the end of the day.
and I think that's really refreshing too, is because I'm exactly the same. Like I love throwing my own lures.
Yeah.
And it's probably the only fish I'm a bit pig-headed with is jewfish. I will only throw mine because when you catch one, it is rewarding to catch it on your own lure. But
I mean, I love catching them on mine.
But if I go bass fishing and they're not biting and they're eating a spinnerbait, well, I'm going to tie a bass man spinnerbait on because I'm like you. I want to catch a fish. And I guess it's a good thing for guys that are getting into making lures. Don't get disheartened if you're out there not catching them on your lures, because they don't eat timber lures every day of the week.
That's right,
Dirty river like we've got now, well, I wouldn't be tying a crankbait on straight up. I'd be putting a spinnerbait on or something like that. So don't get disheartened if you are making a few lures and they're not working. It is a seasonal thing, and you just sort of need to mix it up a little bit. Use other people's. And by using other people's lures, Kev, you learn so much about lures.
Yeah. That's what I love about the industry now, you know, and particularly the soft plastic industry. It makes you work a lure a lot more.
Yep.
But even with wooden lures, if you're not going to work them and make them twitch and turn and stuff like that, just wind them in all the time like that, you know. You got to work them the same as plastics.
Yeah, especially
you can catch fish in 30, 40 feet of water with a soft plastic.
Yes.
Just let it go to the bottom and work it properly.
Yeah.
And that, but I remember I was up on the Clarence River. Peter Newell wanted me to take him, and I took him. And I caught 5 bass, you know, probably the biggest one would have been 56, 57 centimetres.
Yeah.
And Pete hadn't caught anything. And I took him right up where the water was pouring down through a little gorge.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, here, I had a Vibratron lure that Darryl Schultz bought in America years ago. We bought a few each.
Yeah.
And it worked perfect. It's like a spinnerbait, and put the big plastic, soft plastic on the hook. And it was just the perfect lure for that type of conditions. Dirty water, running down through the rocks.
Yep.
A lot of noise coming out, a big blade flashing on it.
Yeah.
And I said to Pete, he wanted to catch a bass, and I said, well, put one of these on. And he said, no, I'll catch it on my lure. You know, and anyway, another hour had gone past, and I pulled 5 more out. We ended up coming home and he wouldn't change.
He wouldn't change?
Yeah, and I said, well, mate, you know, like if you want to catch one, you're going to have to use this.
Yeah.
But, you don't want to lose sight of how many other good lure makers are out there that make beautiful lures that all work, you know, and really good, so...
And talking about that, right now in Australia, it's probably never been so strong. Timber lure making right now is alive, and it is well, because we go out to the Glenline Lure Makers Tournament, and everyone brings their 6 lures up and lays them down, and you sit there and you have a look, and there are some really talented lure makers. And I'm talking about guys that don't sell them either, just guys that make them for themselves to have a good time, and there's some talent, and it is alive out there now. It's very good.
Well, it's all, the thing that I see with it is so artistic now, and that's what I love about it. Yeah, you got jewellers making them, and, you know, people like that.
Yeah.
They got all this fine work and intricate work on the lure, and the painting is something, you know, brilliant, the paint work on lures now, where I just get in it and think, well, you know, that'll do, you know, it looks near it.
Also, so these, we'll skip forward a little bit. These are some of Kev's from more recent years.
Yeah.
This is sort of this is under your KC Lures brand now, and as you see, guys, he still loves that shape, that typical sort of bent back shape, and like you said, they just catch fish, Kev.
Well, they work, you know, so why you don't want to change it if they work, and, you know, just go with it. And one of the shapes that I really like, that's very close to the original boomerang.
Yep.
And but I didn't get it perfect, so I've made it so I'll fish with it, you know.
Yeah.
So I'll always put a good stainless steel screw in the front of them there. You know it's not going to pull out.
No, for
the
sure.
old galvanised wire is still the best, for making your toe points.
Your toe points, the guys that have been in themselves, yeah. And that's a beautiful lure.
Yeah.
So while we're on the lure box there, pull out your favourite one, Kev. If you had to pick one lure out of there.
Yeah, well, my favourite one is the grey ghost.
The grey ghost. There's actually one of those hung up just over here.
Yeah, in that size.
Yep.
But one of the lures that I really loved that I made was, it's a little, it's got a beautiful action. It's the boomerang shape, but it's thin.
Yep.
Like the thickness of it.
Yep, flat-sided,
And that lure, it's unbelievable, the cod, Murray cod I've caught on it.
Yep.
And big bass.
Yep.
Yellow belly. It's just got a beautiful action. It's tight. Like, you'll find that yellow belly Murray cod, they like a bit of wider action. Bass nearly always like that little tight action, even though you'll get them on the other ones, but you get more on that tighter action. But that shape, I really love that lure. It's a really good lure. And
talking about that colour, that's been just such a proven performer in that western flowing rivers for so many years, hasn't it? That browny orange, yellow.
Yep. But this grey ghost, like, if you're trolling that lure and it gets down to 5 metres, it must stand out pretty well or something, because you just get hammered. Barry Reeves and I had one of them each, just the small one.
Was it this?
Yeah, that shape.
One of those?
Yeah. And in probably 5 or 6 months, between us, we caught 500 bass out of Turnham Dam on that lure. And that lure and the gold one, the red and gold, this one, won about 6 or 7 comps in Turnham Dam with those 2 lures.
And guys, and you say, why is that such a good lure? And it simply comes down to, in my book, it's the depth that lure was reaching and the action of the lure.
Well, it was in the zone.
In the zone.
It goes to 5 metres. And that one's got a tighter action than that bib.
Yep.
That bib's a bit wider.
Yep.
This one's a bit tighter.
Yep.
And that.
And
but for some reason, if you pull that colour in that lure through the water, when we were using them up in the Clarence and that one, and we're just looking at it, and it looks just like a herring.
Yep.
And me mate, we were fishing there for 2 hours one day, and we weren't getting anything, and he said, I'll put the ghost on and see what happens. And I couldn't tie mine on quick enough. Like, we landed about 8 or 10 big bass, one after the other.
And that just shows you that colour does make a difference.
It does make a difference. I believe that it makes a difference.
We actually had this conversation yesterday.
Yeah. Some people say, no, it makes no difference at all. But it was like I said to you, I was throwing a black and white tadpole under the bottle brush trees.
Yeah.
And the bass had followed it right out to the boat and just turn and go back under.
Yeah.
Anyway, I changed to a red and white tadpole and a tiny tad, and they just crashed it every time.
Yeah.
But when I caught the first bass, he had a mouthful of flowers off the tree. And the flowers have got a heap of bugs in them and ants and stuff like that. So they know that by eating them, they're getting the protein out of it.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think colour does, stand out a lot in different occasions and stuff like that. I think it does work. But I found that now I make my favourite, probably half a dozen colours.
Yep.
Like that and that and that, and
And you've got them pretty well covered there.
You can paint 20 or 30 different colours, but like on days these just the natural colour works really well.
Yep, just your
I've
natural.
caught a lot of bass on that colour. This colour here, Barry got probably 20 bass on that one afternoon.
Yep,
like that.
Just a beautiful nude silky oak by the looks of it.
Yeah.
And guys, this is another really cool point to bring up. A lot of guys say, let's just look at this guy here. Only this one Kevin was talking about. Guys will be saying, oh, that's way too big for bass. You've got to remember, these rivers, the fish eat big things, don't they? They're eating turtles, they're eating bigger herring, mullet. They are used to seeing big lures. So guys that might fish the smaller system, say like the Nepean or down back of Sydney, and they're throwing your little cranks, stuff like this is normal up here. It's normal to throw an 80 to 90 mil lure. It's not uncommon, is it?
Not uncommon, especially when you're in the river system. In the dams, it can be slightly different.
Yep.
They'll probably, if they're not getting that big herring and mullet and stuff like that, then they're feeding on smaller.
Yeah.
But once you get in the river, like Robert Lockwood and I were under the Grafton Bridge chasing jewfish on a Halco big mackerel level like that, and all we got was 6 pound bass and 5 pound bass.
It just shows you match the hatch of what they're eating, and they're going to eat it. They don't.
They're feeding on big herring. I remember Pat Morrissey in Casino here years ago when I was only about 14, and Pat was with us, and he caught a 3.5 pound bass, and he opened it up and kept it and cleaned it, and there was a 12-inch water lizard, water dragon inside of it.
Yeah.
And it had rolled it. Its head back was like that, and the body right around it in a circle like that.
Amazing.
It was just in its stomach. It's totally different fishing in the river systems to what it is in the dams.
Very different. So,
on what size lure and what food they're feeding on.
Now, I'm going to dive into that a little bit later when we talk about the eastern cod. We're going to dive into that because I know you've got some really cool data and stuff that will be really interesting to lots of people. But I actually got a question this morning. I put out a little thing on Instagram. I'm just going to read it out here. I said, look, if anyone's got some questions, I'm interviewing a guy that knows a thing or two about lures and bass fishing. I've got some pretty cool little questions come through. One here was from Root Gaydon, and it says, I guess in this question we're referring to cod, barra and bass. And he says, is a trophy dam fish the same as a wild fish of equal length? Now, what's your opinion on that, Kev? If you, say, get a 50 out of the dam opposed to a 50 bass in the river, what's your opinions on that?
Well, my opinion on it is you can catch really big fat bass in the river, but they're always slightly longer and leaner because they're chasing their food harder than what they do in the dams. You know, the food in the dam system, I believe, is in abundance, you know, and it's more thicker and regular. Where in the river system, like they're moving a lot more and they're chasing food in fast flowing waters and stuff like that. So I think the fish in the wild are usually stronger, harder fish, you know, quite a lot harder.
Totally agree.
And they're slightly leaner and longer. Yeah.
And I think they definitely can be more challenged than a dam. They can't really go anywhere in a dam. But
that's right.
You get we've had 300 mils of rain. They could move 100 kilometres in a few days.
You look at a good big fat bass out of out of the dams up like Somerset, Ivanhoe. They're almost a square. You know, they're like that and like that. Where in the river system they're a lot leaner and stuff like that.
And like you said, they pull like no tomorrow because they're used to working. They have to work for everything. They have to work to survive, literally. And in a dam, you don't have bull sharks trying to eat you. You're not competing with carp as much for food source. So they are a lot more of a hardy fish, aren't they?
But even the fish in the wild, like when Australian bass would be lining up now to run back down from Casino here, they'll run all the way back down to Woodburn, Coracai, all the way down the river there. And when they're carrying their eggs and that, they still fight hard, but not as hard as when they throw them or they spawn. So any bass in the Richmond River and the Clarence River and Nemboida, if they haven't spawned in June, July, like that, and they'll start in about the second week in August, September, they'll start to return back up into the fresh. And you'll say, well, we're catching fish in the gorge with eggs in them. They didn't spawn, they brought them back with them. But on the third week in October, the Richmond, the Clarence and Nemboida, you won't get a bass after that weekend with eggs in it. They'll just throw them.
They drop them.
Because Stuart and I did the work on them. I took Stuart up and we caught a bass. In the second week in October, she was full of eggs. They weren't going to ovulate and spawn. Went back after the third weekend and caught another big bass in the same spot, not an egg in it. And Stuart said there's no way she would have got rid of her eggs in that time by spawning. So she's just throwing them, just free flow, let them go. And once that happens, that same fish, 5 pound bass that was full of eggs, now got no eggs. You want to jump your line capacity up a little bit stronger.
She's angry.
She's angry and she'll give it to you. So there's a lot of difference between the river and the dams.
Definitely, to me, a 50 in the river is definitely more of an achievement than catching one in a dam. Hey, if I got one in the dam, I'll be stoked. But that river 50's always been the benchmark, hasn't it?
And you find that like the amount of fish that I've caught, and not skiding about it, but I've caught that many bass and cod and that over my life that I get 1 5 or 6 pound bass in the river, I'm happy to go back to the camp and put my feet up.
Yeah.
It just feels really nice when you catch that beautiful big fish, you know.
And this is the perfect segue into our next part. You've touched on a little bit there. Yourself and Stuart Rowlands, of course, were a big part in the eastern cod rehabilitation on the Clarence River and the Richmond Rivers.
Yeah.
As you've just mentioned a little bit about, Kevin knows his stuff, and that's because Kevin spent a lot of time involved with the fisheries and these sort of people. So just take us through a little bit for the people that don't know. The eastern cod, obviously hundreds of millions of years ago, migrated over, we think, from the western of the range, and obviously there was the Clarence River cod and the Richmond River cod. Talk us through a little bit about that, and obviously how we saw a big decline and how you guys were implementing things to bring them back to the way they are today.
Yeah, well, I started with Stuart in 1984, and we didn't breed fish and release until 88. Yep. But what it was, like millions of years ago when they were, we think that, all right, they're Murray cod. They were, when the Great Dividing Range formed, they become isolated in the eastern drainage.
Yep.
So they had to change to be able to breed and spawn in that system, and it's a lot faster than the western waters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, the work we done on that, it was just amazing because everyone thought they were still just Murray cod, and people were really, like, there was people from Casino here and Grafton and Glen Ennis that were coming down and catching 20 and 30 in a weekend and killing everything.
Yeah.
And I believe that we got in there just at the right time.
Yeah.
And there was Cole Graham, myself and Ron Cobain that were catching these fish and looking at them and not knowing each other, didn't know them then.
Yeah.
And I had photos of the eastern cod, and Cole had them and Ron, and every time we'd look at them and catch a Murray cod and we think they were different, I had 2 photos and I'd hold them up and they looked different. And one day I was up in the Namboida sitting on a rock under a tree, and these 2 blokes paddled up in their canoe and it was Ron and Cole. And they hadn't, they'd never met me, you know.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the cod, and they said, oh, there's a bloke in Casino, Kev Clarke, that, you know, knows a bit about it as well, you know. And I said, yeah, that's me. So that's how it started, and we got together, and they said, well, we know Stuart Rowlands, and we're going to get Stuart to come over and have a look at them. Would you like to come to a meeting and bring your photos and things like that? Yeah. So that's how it happened, and we all wrote letters to the fisheries department and the government, and they ended up giving Stuart a grant and to come over and look at them. But I believe, and I will sort of puff my chest out a little bit, if Stuart and I hadn't done the work we did, we wouldn't have had the eastern cod, we'd have lost them.
Yeah.
And that. Because no one was interested in preserving them and looking after them, and you had to go in there and say, well, look, we know there's still pockets with fish in it, but they were getting to where the gene pool, they wouldn't have, it would have, you know, just finished. Yeah,
fizzled itself out eventually.
Yeah, it would have got to where you could have, they would have been inbreeding between themselves and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah. So originally, as far as I believe, you had, say, like your Mary River cod, your Richmond River cod, and the Clarence River cod.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously the Clarence River cod and the Richmond cod eventually cohabitated into our East Coast cod.
Yeah. Well, they were the 3 different river systems, and they were the only rivers they were in, but they ended up all being genetically the same.
Yeah.
You know, so then turned out to be the eastern freshwater cod.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, and it's one of the things that I really feel proud and honoured about, that I got the opportunity to go with Stuart and work with him. He's one of the best people I've ever been with, and he done a fantastic job, great biologist, and and he saved the eastern cod. Yeah. You know, and he worked really hard on them. He got the band put on, you know, at the right time. Yeah. And then we went through that process of learning how and bringing them because they lived in really pristine waters, it was hard bringing them back into the ponds at work that were still fairly dirty.
Yep.
And it really stressed them out when they were in that dirty water. So we had to put big filtration systems in to make the water nice and clean.
Yep. To make it more like their natural habitat.
Make it more like their natural, and changing them too. You're trying to catch food from them, like, because they were on live food all the time, and trying to change them to dead food was really hard. Yeah, it took quite a while.
This leads perfectly into, Kev, like as we know, like our Clarence systems and Emboyd are the man, full of big bass. But they're also full of lots of cod from the work that you guys have done. Yep. And something that I know we've spoken about this a lot in the past, and you've got the scientific data to prove that this is wrong. I hear it all the time and it grinds my bloody gears, is all the cod have eaten all the bass, I'm not catching bass. That is utterly crap, isn't it? It's not true.
No, it's not true. It's people talking about something they don't know nothing about. Yeah. And you get it all the time, and I get it the same. Yeah. And it really... it cheeses me off because I get into a hell of a blue with it, Yeah. The eastern cod were, in those earlier days, they were that thick in those rivers you could have, slid across their backs and up the bank on the other side. But they're the main predator in the system, and the system doesn't work properly without them being in there. Yeah. Now, we released in '88, and in the Clarence River in particular, and the Emboyd now, they're still in the Richmond. They're going pretty good in the Richmond, but we had a lot of fish killed out of the Richmond when we first released them. They got up to 3-year-old. Yeah. Everyone was telling you in the pub how good they were to eat and stuff like that, and asking you, when are you going to put more in there? Well, I'm not going to put any more in if you're going to keep killing them and taking them.
No, for sure.
But they're the main predator in the system. They need to be there, and since 1988, in the last 3 years, I've got a place on the Clarence where I fish all the time, to go there now and see, we would probably have a 20-year class of broodfish in there. Yep. That's a year class of fish. Yep. And when you get a big herd of broodfish, it's amazing what they've done. The river is just full of cod, full of bass, catfish, eels, herring, mullet, whatever. But you can see the river system working now. Yep. And we've got cod in there probably up to 70 and 80 pounds, 60 odd pounds.
And just explain to the people, obviously, what we've just said, the cod don't eat the bass. Explain, because I know you've talked about the research you've actually done when you've looked inside the cod. Just explain to what they've seen inside them.
We did belly flushing on them and stuff like that to see what they're eating. And we never ever found a bass in them. Yeah. Even though they will have a crack at them and eat them if they can catch them. But we never ever found a bass in them. Their main diet we found was a lot of turtles, some platypus, white-tailed water rat, and birds, a lot of birds, cormorants, and ducks, things like that as they got bigger. We found they ate a lot of mussels. Yeah. So if you look at a heap of dead mussels on the bottom of the Clarence River in shallow water, and they're just open like that, 9 times out of 10, they've been eaten by a cod.
Cod, he's been having a chew on them.
He'll swallow them, he'll ferment them in his gut, they'll open up, the meat comes out, then he spits the shells out. Yeah.
Amazing creature.
If they're broken up or cracked, then it's a platypus or a white-tailed water rat, because they'll take them up on the rock and just break them open and eat them,
And look, I can understand why people would think the cod have eaten all the bass. Now, there's a couple of reasons, I think, in my personal opinion, is A, we're fishing different for them. The thing is, if you got a lovely snag or something, and there's a cod and a bass cohabitating on that snag, the old bass ain't going to get rode with the cod to come out and eat it. He's going to say, not a chance, I'll let it, he can have that. I ain't fighting with that big fella. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But the other thing is too, people have a bass on the side of the canoe. And a cod will come up and smash it. They eat all the bass. The cod's trying to eat what the bass has. That's what I believe. I'm thinking the cod's more like, hang on, you little bugger. You just stole my tucker. He's trying to get the tucker back more so than eat the bass. But as we know, they'll come up and swallow the bass. So I think that has a lot to do with this whole mentality.
Oh, it does. And the other big thing that has a lot to do with it is these people, and these people know who I'm talking about when I say this, that if you want to know where all your bass are going, take your nets out of the water. Yeah. The Clarence River would be netted probably every second night you know.
Yeah,
and
for
people
sure.
don't know that.
Yeah.
But the people that know, that let the people come in and do it,
Yeah.
they know they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. And it happens.
They net the guts out of it. I've been up there on my place for, say, 5 days, and I've been out, and you'll catch 30 cod some day, you know, because you can't get your lure back and they're smacking it. And the next day you go out, and they're going back and settle down, and you're hooking bass.
Yeah.
You know, you get 30 or 40 bass. You know, like, they're not eating the bass out, it's the nets that go in there, the illegal fishing that's still happening, not as much, because we've got so many people out there now that are enjoying catching and releasing a cod. I mean, you're not supposed to target them, but you can't get your lure back.
No.
I put my favourite bass lure on, you know.
He's got to come out and smash it.
The next minute I'm fighting a 25-pound cod on it, but you don't take it out of the water, just pull the hook out of its mouth.
Yeah.
If I take a cod out of the water, I carry a black bin about so big in the boat, I fill it up with water, the cod comes out in the landing net, goes into there, take the hook out of him. If I've drifted down, I'll paddle back up to where I caught him and put him over and let him back down. Don't put them in white containers or anything like that, because it'll stress them out and kill them. But in black, you can't find them, you've got to feel around in there to get them. They settle down straight away, and just, same with your bass. Yeah, I'll put my bass in it. You want to take a nice photo? All right, we'll go over under that tree. And get a bit of background in the tree and just click, you know.
And then off he goes and he's happy.
So handling your fish make a big difference too. People have got to learn how to handle their bass and that. Like, I see the bass competitions, and sometimes them guys have really got to think about what they're doing. You know, when they throw a bass over their legs and lapping, they're wiping the slime off them, throw them back in, they've held them out too long. And the same with fishing in the wild, in the rivers and stuff like that. You've got to learn how to handle your fish. And we learnt that when we were working with them all the time. You know.
Talking about your tournaments, it's been really good to see Steve Morgan from ABT. Probably about 5 years stepped up and went, guys, we're not taking photos of your fish if you're hanging them anymore. It's as simple as that. You have one fish in your hands and it's as simple as that. And I think that's really good. People like that taking a stance of going, hey, like, we want my kids and their kids and their kids to catch them and look after them. So,
people have got to just learn how to handle them a lot better and look after them. But Steve Morgan, he's actually a legend in what he did with soft plastic lures and stuff.
Oh, for sure,
I've seen him and his brother, Tim, in Clary Hall Dam, in one session pull 70 bass off one corner. And that's when the competition changed to saying your 5 best fish. Because no one could catch 100 fish in the morning. Steve and Tim were slaughtering us, you know. So the only way we could stop them from winning was to say your 5 best fish.
And for you, like what you guys did for the timber lure industry, people like Steve and like obviously Harry Watson with the importing of Jackal, that was like the first big brand that sort of come. They changed it for a different reason. They've sort of made everyone aware of these different techniques and different lures available.
And that's where Steve come in when he changed the techniques on soft plastics and things like that. And the lovely thing about what come out of that was that Australia now has these really good fishing competitions, and we're all looking after our fish. So we've virtually ended up with, you know, thousands of fishing inspectors, because if you're out on the Clarence River and someone's got a net across it, they'll pull it out and chop it up and burn it or
Someone
whatever.
knows it's not right.
Or they'll ring up and report it and stuff like that. But the lovely thing about soft plastics is that what I love about them is to be able to put them on the bottom and talk someone into eating it. And we wouldn't have done that without Steve. I mean, Vic McChrystal always used quite a few old soft plastics and stuff like that, and caught a lot of bass on them, you know, and things like that. But no, we've got a really good system now with our fishing and competitions, and there's a lot of money goes back into town, and the fish all get let go.
And even your catch and kill comps, at once catch and kill comps, like the Evans Head Fishing Classic, I'm nothing against that tournament at all. Now, it's all photo and release. Like every tournament now is trying to encourage it all. And I love taking a feed of fish. I have absolutely against no one. I know you love to eat fish yourself, Kevin. But the rules, the regulations are there for a reason. And they're to regulate the fish so in another 100, 200 years they're still there for our kids, their kids and their kids to catch. So never feel bad about taking a feed of fish.
No, well, the regulations are fair. And I always fish just for my own, like, my own needs and that.
Yeah, of course.
So a blue salmon that long feeds me for 3 or 4 days, you know. So I don't keep another one until I eat that one.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think if more people just follow the rules, well, there won't be a problem.
A lot of people like that now. Yeah. And you can see the fishery building up. Like we've got a great freshwater fishery now. Like our bass and our cod, and yellow belly, and and all that sort of stuff. Like our rivers are flowing with fish, and the dams and that. And the dams have done a great job because they've taken the pressure off our wild fishery.
Yes.
Like I say to people, if you want to keep a feed of bass or something, go to the dam and catch it, because we could stock it. Like we stock Turnambow every year, 8 or 10,000 fish. 15,000 go into it. Leave the wild fishery alone. Let it look after itself, and it will look after itself if you let them go and do what they got to do. So
the perfect example.
We're pretty blessed, really.
We are. Yeah. Perfect example of that is I know a good friend of yourself, Brian Dare at Glenline Dam. They put so much money back into that dam for stocking, and if you get a metre cod, Brian is stoked if you take that. If you want to take that fish from eel, that's fine, because that's just how the system works. Those fish are probably past almost the breeding stage anyway. Put it back into the little fish and everyone's happy. Like it's just, people aren't always negative about keeping fish.
But in the wild, the thing that people should learn about the wild is that it's totally different to the dams. So if you've got a cod in the wild that's a metre 20 or metre 30, and it might be past spawning and stuff like that, but it still plays a major role in working that, making that system balance and work properly. So it's like your grandfather, if he lives to 90 and he can still tell you things that
pass on
are
wisdom
important and wisdom and that to you. And the cod are the same. Like he'll die when he's old and he's finished and that. But while he's in there, he's still saying, look, this is, if you get a dry time, they'll go around and they'll just say, well, bad luck, Johnny, I'm going to eat you. You know? But once the season comes good again, everyone breeds and up they go again. You know?
That's just how the food chain works.
And that's how it works. And when people understand that, then we'll have a better fishery than we've even got now. Because, you got to think about what you're doing. You can't just go out there and think, well, I'm just going to take what I want. And like I seen it at Iluka, people killing the Australian salmon and throwing them up on the beach, saying that they're scum, they're no good, they're a nuisance, stuff like that. And you can't have but other fish eat it, like the white pointer shark eat it, and that's their main diet.
It's just a food chain. It just all goes around and around, and you take one of those parts out and the chain will break.
So, be aware about what you're doing, and, that little creature, what you killed, had an important role to play in the whole system, so...
Oh, that's awesome, Kev. We've really touched on that, and no, that's been really good. We've dived into the timber lures. We're probably we'll start to wrap things up a little bit. I have got some guest questions, Kev, that I know everyone loves to hear the answers of. So, your favourite lure of all time? It doesn't have to be yours. It doesn't even need to be timber, Kev. If you just want one lure, what is your favourite?
Tiny tad.
Tiny tad. And let me guess, black and white?
It's black and white. There's a green frog-coloured one, but they're a faultless lure. You can't find a fault with them.
They just work.
They just work, and I love the tiny tads, the tadpoles, the magnum, the head and deep sixes, head and meadow mouth. But they're probably my favourite 3 lures, and I've caught a lot of fish on them.
And if you fished in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s even, there's a pretty good chance you would have had one of those in your tackle box.
I'm fishing in 2004 with them, 24 with them. And,
that's awesome, mate.
I carry them with me all the time, but I just like them. They're just a beautiful lure, and I do really well on them. But if I tied one of my own, I'd probably do just as well. But there's something about them. They just cast well. They're just a great lure.
Just love them. Not lures, but who's a lure maker? Someone that you always sort of looked up to. Obviously, you were still in that early sort of stage, but was there someone that you sort of looked up to as far as lure making?
Yeah, well, I always looked up to Peter Newell. And I like the lures that Pete made. He was probably the main bloke for me with freshwater lures and that. And he was a great lure maker. Particularly with big cod lures and things like that. But it's hard to say that I can make a perfect cod lure. They're good. But cod will eat any size. I've caught them on tadpoles and little tiny tads and stuff like that. But No, I like Peter Newell because I knew him pretty well and fished with him a few times and took him, with me and that. But yeah, Pete would have been probably my favourite lure maker.
It's funny. Well, this is only episode 3 of doing this. I would love to count how many times Peter Newell's names come up with Debbie and Matt. He was obviously such a vibrant character and such a great lure maker as well.
Yeah. But Eric Moller was a great lure maker, and Dave Killerley. Yeah. I met Dave when I was fishing Tinaroo and used a lot of his little lures and stuff like that. But I had quite a lot of Eric's lures and stuff like that. Yeah. But Peter would have been the bloke that just stood out to me a lot, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Even though I was, using their lures up there too, Eric Moller's. Yeah. Because every time I went with Vic and you'd use the lures that you went up there with. And,
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. This next one, it's not actually fishing related. It can be fishing related. Take it however you want. What's the best piece of advice, if you could give it to anyone, Kevin? It could be about life. It could be about lure collecting, anything. What's the best piece of advice? I stump everyone with this question.
Well, probably the best thing was the same advice that my father gave me, and that was make sure you got patience.
Yeah. With whatever you do.
Whatever you do, have patience, because you can lose a lot of good friends by not having patience. Yeah. No, that's a cracker. So I've over the years I've learnt to have patience, and a lot of my mates that come fishing with me. I remember Julius Beneke last year. He was up north with me, and I'd only been on the same snag for 3 hours, which is not long. You know? But he said, Kev, can I ask you to move, because I'm going to have to cut my wrists or I'm going to need Valiums if you have. And I said, well, I'm not moving because I know there's a bloody barra down there and I hook one.
Just be patient.
It just took that amount of time, but patience would be the key to me.
Whether it's growing a business, friendships, anything.
Everything,
That's awesome.
Just covers everything, I believe, anyway.
That's a cracker, mate. That's really good. That's awesome. And it's great that your father had passed that down to you.
My dad said, patience and that, and just you'll get on in life really well if you got good patience.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. What's your most memorable catch on one of your lures? One of the older ones, one of the new ones? Is there a fish that stands out that goes, wow, that was pretty memorable?
Well, there's a couple when I made my first cedar lure that I caught some big bass on it, were memorable, but the best one I ever had was on a jitterbug. Yeah. And I was up on the Clarence River, and it was a full moon night.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I went up to my favourite spot and I hurled this lure. Daryl Schultz was with me. And I let this lure fly about 30 or 40 metres. And it touched down like that, and this 5.5 pound bass just smashed it. And the moon was shining down across the water like that, and you just see this 3 metres or 4 metres of water droplets going through the air, and I can still see it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was just the most magical moment. This big bass just hit it.
And it doesn't need to be the biggest fish you've ever caught, because it's so memorable. Yeah, but
it was just big enough to, come up and put this water all up, and the moon was shining through the water droplets.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's unreal.
It's just like I can look there and see it. It was so beautiful.
Oh, unreal.
Yeah.
Well, that goes into this next one. This hasn't been a guest question. I just thought of this one on the spot. You had to go and catch a bass right now. Where would you go, and what one lure would you tie on?
Well, tie a tiny dad on.
Yeah, and then with the Clarence River.
And it'd be the Clarence River.
Yeah, that's awesome. A particular section, mate, or just anywhere in that Clarence River?
Any section, but where I got my little place up near the Eagle Bar Castle, I'd go up there to where the water's only a metre deep and all rocky. Yeah, and that's where I'd use him. Yeah, and I'd catch a bass.
You'd catch one.
But now I'd probably get a cod before the bass got to it.
But it's not because the cod have eaten all the bass.
No.
What do you, with the timber lure industry, obviously you've never lost touch with the timber lure industry, you've always been in touch. Where do you see the lure industry in another 10 years, the timber lure industry in Australia? The fact that it's just going in leaps and bounds now.
I think it's just going to keep on improving. There's something about timber, just to hold it in your hand, and that. And I'll never stop using wooden lures. I just love them, you know.
There's something about walking into a tackle store and mine must, I have a hung on a card, and there's just something about looking at it, isn't it? Not in a packet, just to feel, and you know that someone's made it.
You know that someone made it, and you know what goes into making a lure, you know. And that's what I love about it. And I use lures now. I love it because I use them more of a meditation type of thing.
Yeah.
So I can sit down and make that lure, but it might take me 8 hours all day.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll just smooth away and keep rubbing it and polishing it.
And the mind's thinking, and all the day's stresses are gone. And
it's just, I just love them. But I think it's just going to go on with leaps and bounds because the tackle shows and the people that are making lures now, you know, and all that beautiful artistic work that's going into them, you know, it can't stop now.
No, it's just going to keep steamrolling on.
There'll always be, you know, your soft plastics and things like that, but it's like all lures, you use them in certain places and, you know, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I reckon it'll just keep on going.
Keep going,
Because I'm going to keep making them until I fall off the chair.
Bloody oath, and that's exactly what we wanted to hear. Now, mate, just before we finish up, obviously you're up in the tropics now, most of your years up in the tropics where all the cool fish live. What's a typical day for Kev? When Kev gets out of bed, what's Kev get up and do?
Well, when I get out of bed, and the first thing I do is walk out on the front porch and have a look at the weather, see what it is, and if it's going to be, it looks really good, I just walk into the shed and wind the boat down onto the towball because every afternoon I reverse act and park the towball under the boat.
Ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go. Everything's there and you just throw it in the boat.
That's awesome.
And away I go. And I normally go 5 and 6 days a week when I'm up there.
That's awesome.
Every day, yeah. And if I don't fish, I just explore.
Yeah.
Like I love going down a river system and reading it and looking at it. I'll sit there, the longest I've sat in one spot's 5 hours.
Yeah.
But I learnt so much about where the fish were feeding in that time on that tide.
Yeah.
And that's the key. If you want to go down and catch fish, like you're going past them, a lot of the big barra will come in and feed where there's just a tiny little drain coming out, a heap of little mullet coming out, and there's only a metre of water there. But you'll drive past it all the time. But if you sit there and watch it, all of a sudden it just explodes.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what Kev does. He goes down the river. No one comes with him because they can't bear to sit in the same spot for 5 hours, you know.
It's funny you say that. One of the things I learned from an early on age, actually Peter Sullivan actually taught me.
Oh, Pete's a classic at it.
And he was like, you just watch. He's like, did you just see that fish rise over there? I'm like, what fish rise? He's like, that ripple on the water. I'm like, didn't something just fall for the tree? He's like, no, it was a dorsal fin of the bass. And being observant, like I hate noise in the boat because you can't hear things. Hearing fish popping, mullet popping, shrimp, you can hear shrimp clicking. All those things honed you into everything. And you don't care if you don't catch a fish, Kev.
Yeah, I went with Peter one night. We were sitting down below Jabal Weir in that pool in his canoe, and he threw the lure out and put the rod down, and then he made a sandwich, had a cup of tea and a cigarette, and then I thought, is he going to move that bloody lure? Next minute, boom, you know, there's a great wallop and 2.5 pound bass on it.
Yeah.
And I think Pete had a bit to do with realising what my dad said to me, patience. But he's a really good bloke, and that's patience, you know. And it always works, you know. Take your time, don't get excited about it and ripping your lure too quick and away. And a lot of people just have 3 or 4 casts at a snag. Like I've had 60 casts at one snag. You know, and then caught a fish. You know.
And talking about patience, guys, if you're getting into lure making and you don't have patience, pick another hobby. Just pick another hobby because
something else to do.
It's not for you. Like it's the most testing, trying thing because you'll have it right and then for some reason your paint will bubble and you've got to work out why the paint bubbled. And it was because the humidity was 0.2 of a degree more than the day before. Like it is...
And if you don't work it out, you can destroy it, you know, hours of work.
100%.
And I've done that, you know.
That's where your quality control comes in. Like each couple of batch, you just check everything to make sure it's right. Because the last thing you want to do is make a huge batch of lures and they all crack and bubble and you.
Oh mate, you make a beautiful lure like that, and then you decide, I'll keep going. I'll put the eyes on it, you know, and you muck the eyes up.
And then that one goes in your tackle box.
You've got to put it in your tackle box, or take it right back to the timber again, and away you
Start
go.
again.
You know, so.
Well, Kev, I really appreciate you sitting down with us today, and I've got a feeling we'll probably do another one with Kev. He's been at me to come for a fish, and I want to go up and check out the up around Kev's place. So if I end up that way later in the year, Kev, I reckon we sit down again and
mate, it'd be lovely.
We'll touch on it again, because we could sit here for 10 hours and not get all the info out.
Oh yeah, and I love talking about it because there's a lot that you can teach people and stuff like that about it, and how to look after our fishery. That's a big key.
Yeah,
looking after our fishery and how we handle our fish.
And while your knowledge with lures is great, there's not a lot of people that have the knowledge on the river systems themselves like yourself. No, thanks, Kev, and I hope everyone at home enjoys watching this. It's been a cracking day.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks very much.